Hello, I'm Lauren Cedarstrom. Today I'm with my co-host, Diana Longry. Thank you for joining me, Diana.
Thanks.
Well, today we're going to be talking about roads, okay? The city of Grant has approximately 50 miles of roads of its own and another 50 miles of state and county highways. And the joke is there's more horses in Grant than there are people. And that's what the kind of road policy they have, is they have a horse and buggy road policy. And the way it's set up is if you want your road fixed, you have to pay for it yourself. When I was on the city council, I had suggested that we charge $25 per 100,000 and put it in a road fund so we fix all the roads. Because 50% of the roads in Grant, like I said, are county and state roads, and those people pay nothing. The other roads, we have approximately 50 miles, it's half gravel and half asphalt. Well, the gravel roads obviously have to be graded. They have to have calcium chloride for dust control. They also have to have a top coat every once in a while. You have to add more surface and binder so that it requires continued maintenance. And the schedule they currently had, if you're lucky, every 7 years you might get a seal coat. Well, when a road is 30 years old, it's way beyond having a seal coat. It needs to be rebuilt. And sometimes you can resurface them and get another 10, 15 years out of them if you're lucky. But not this city council. They want to keep taxes low, and that's their mantra. And Mr.
Cedarstrom, of course, there's nothing wrong with keeping your taxes low, but you also want to be able to provide those essential services that your community expects or depends on. And there is a value to having good roads in your community. There's less wear and tear on your vehicles. It's more safe when you're driving at night. There's a lot of different reasons why you want to have good roads. I mean, that is a basic public service people expect in their community.
Well, it also makes economic sense. For example, McCusick Road takes you to the Gost House. It's a shortcut between 96 and Manning. When I was on the council, I worked with the old engineer Phil Olson, and we came up with a way to patch the potholes and put an 1.5 or 2 inch overlay on it. Now it's already got a 5-inch base, and that would take it another 10 to 15 years, and we could have done it for $130,000. Well, he went to a municipality to work as an engineer, and we have a new one. Well, they totally ignored that, and Brad Riestek is the new engineer, and when he pitched it to the people that live on the road, the 8 people that live there, he ignored that we could do that, my plan, for $130,000, and they told him, well, it's going to cost $450,000 for a rebuild. So you divide that by 8. People aren't going to come up with $55,000, $60,000.
Well, and that's another thing too, Mr. Cedarstrom, that you bring up, is that, again, people aren't looking at it that they, as 1 out of 8 people on that road, that it's their responsibility to take care of a public road. It would be a different thing if this were a private driveway and that all the property owners along the private driveway chip in and say, yeah, we're all going to go in on a few dump loads of gravel to put in the potholes. But that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about a public road, and your analysis that the city of Grant hasn't really put together a plan where they can properly fund those roads is accurate, because their needs and what they're dealing with their road policy is entirely different than a municipality such as North St. Paul or Maplewood, where you've got a lot of houses in a short distance of a block. You've got a lot of houses. In the rural community that you live in, it's much different. You have property owners that have large tracts of land, and they have large street front footage that they cannot afford the special assessment that would be charged against them.
Well, most municipalities also have their own road funds, and say they only get charged marginally. But the interesting thing about this McCusick Road is for the last 4 years, they've been spending $30,000 a year just patching it. And it could have been completely done in one shot. But so that's the kind of the background of what this is. And now we're going to go with our first clip. They're talking about a road project report, and we'll talk on the other side.
Now, when was this city council meeting,
This
real
was
quick?
November.
Okay, so this is November's, and you guys only have one meeting a month, correct?
That's right.
Okay, so let's take a look.
Is really just for the council to gather more information about the improvements and to make an informed decision about whether or not to order the improvements. Now, ordering the improvements does not mean that we're going to be bidding the project. It doesn't mean that we are going to be awarding a project to a contractor. It doesn't mean we're going to be assessing the project, right? It's just a matter of defining the scope of the work so that the engineer can prepare the plans and specs for the project. So that's all we're doing tonight is ordering the improvement. Now, the scope of work can be decided by council, whether it's 1 street, 2 streets, 5 streets, all the streets, whatever the council decides to move forward with. So that's the one point, or first point that I wanted to make. The second point is just to talk about the survey cards a little bit. The survey cards, again, they're not legally binding. They're not anything scientific to the card. It was just a way for us to gather more information for the council to make an informed decision about the roadway improvement project. So, you know, I don't want people to feel like signing the card meant they waive their right to an assessment hearing or they waive their rights to anything other than just giving their opinion so that the council had some good information to make a good decision. So that was the only purpose of the card. The only authority I know that can approve a project is the city council. So it doesn't matter if it's, you know, 50% of the residents, 75% of the residents, 1%, it doesn't really matter. The ultimate authority is with the council to make that decision. So with that said, I'll give you the results of the survey. We had a few cards come in late. But for the responses that we received 89 responses. 48 were responding yes, and 41 responded no.
Is the city council has the ultimate decision anyway. And what also was very interesting is they started out to do Joliet, which is a main feeder road for both Victoria Station, which is about 30 homes, and Woodland Acres that has 70 homes. So these people have to drive down this road to get to their homes. Well, Joliet is if you drive down the road, there's more patches that you can see than there is old road. It's absolutely ridiculous. It looks like it's got measles or, you know, leprosy, one of the two. And they were going to do Joliet where the mayor and deputy mayor live on. All of a sudden they come to this meeting and it's not included anymore, because what they were going to do is just give a little light coat to Woodland Acres and Victoria Station, and then do a complete rebuild. Well, a overcoat or is about, the rebuild is 4 times as expensive as just putting an overlayer on it.
Right, and that's because you're working with building up that base of the road, and so there's a lot more to it.
But it just mysteriously disappeared, which the most important road, which is the feeder road, that they just aren't going to do anything with. So that's that. And so there's a lot of behind the scenes stuff, hence there's been several legal suits about violation of open meeting laws and how things change. All of a sudden you'll come to a meeting and there'll be a full-blown proposition that's never been discussed. Sometimes it's even put on the consent agenda, it's voted on, it's never been discussed. So there's a lot of real murky things going on out there.
And I liked his comments in the beginning of that clip where he wanted to reassure everybody that simply voting on this next step doesn't commit the city to hiring the contractors or bidding out the project or spending any money on the actual road reconstruction itself. And I was thinking to myself, you know, this is a slippery slope argument. to say, well, you know, the step we're taking tonight doesn't really bind us to anything. It's sort of like that person that, you know, they're sewing a pair of pants, but the pant legs are too long, so they got to hem them. So they're going to, just cut them off, but that's not going to commit us to actually hemming them to the length we think we need. We aren't really going to get to that part yet. We can always consider that later. When you know that, eventually you're going to get to the part where you're hemming your pant leg, and you're not just going to leave it ragged. You're not just going to put together the plan of hemming the pants and then not actually do it. That's not really the way it works.
Well, let's go to the next clip, and they're gonna tell us how to do it smart.
Tony said it looked like the counts for Justin Trail North were very much against. And if you have to drive on that street to get to 96 from we live on Gennaro Court, it does a little good to pave our road if you gotta, go through a broken road to get to 96. So maybe when you decide hopefully so that it makes sense for an end user. Why pay 12 grand for a road if you have to change your tire when you go through that other road? So anyway, do it smart if you do it.
Yeah, this man lives in a cul-de-sac that goes on to Justin Trail, so he can go down to 96. And the point he makes is, if you're not going to do Justin Trail, why would you even think about doing the cul-de-sac that gets much less traffic? He can drive over bumpy roads for his quarter-mile cul-de-sac when it gets down to the main. So they have no plan at all. It's like the blind leading the deaf, dumb, and stupid. It's just unbelievable the way they're prioritizing things. So let's go to the next one. They're going to talk about the feasibility study, and I'll have some comments on this on the other side.
Justin Trail. So I live on Justin Trail, so the gentlemen that we're talking about, their cul-de-sac, needing access to their cul-de-sac from Justin Trail. My question, I guess, is there's another cul-de-sac that's attached to Justin Trail that my understanding is not part of this assessment. So those folks would then be benefiting from the fix on Justin Trail, but not paying for any of it. I thought at one point they were included. I could be mistaken on that, but I guess overall, it's interesting to me that one side of the road for the cul-de-sac is being assessed, but the other side is not. So I don't quite understand why that is being presented that way. The other thing, just to reiterate, and I've said this before, is that when the feasibility study discussion was presented to us at Victoria Station, it was under the assumption that 75% of the people on the road had to vote or agree yes to have the assessment. And it doesn't seem that that policy is being followed, which I think it should, because that's what led us to agree to do the feasibility.
Well, she didn't keep up with the change in road policy, and we talked about it extensively in our March show, where basically they changed the rules that it no longer needs to be 75%. It doesn't have to be 51%. It doesn't have to be 35%. They slipped it at the end that the city council has the ultimate decision. They can decide to do whatever they do. And it's interesting, too, as we said in the March show, we pointed out that the feasibility studies are now paid for. You no longer have to come up with the $3,000-4,000 before they even will talk about doing the road and having a study. So, as you can see, this is pretty horse and buggy and backwards. It isn't a reasonable way to repair roads. The only infrastructure we have are the roads, and a 100-year-old schoolhouse has been made into a town hall. So this is really ridiculous.
Well, and she brings up, again, this issue about that policy of requiring that before a road is done, that there's 75% of the residents on the road are in agreement with it. But that was only a policy. And it's always important to remember that a policy is different than an ordinance. An ordinance is the law. So if this had been an ordinance that said this, and it hadn't been repealed, well, then she'd have something to stand on. However, it was a policy, and a council can change policy whenever they want. And as you indicated, they changed the policy from listening to 75% of the residents on a road to listening to nobody on the road and just making the decision all on their own.
Yes, it doesn't make any sense. You know, the road policy is totally backwards. Everyone in the city should be contributing towards the roads, even if you live on a county or state road, because you drive on local roads. It should be a group effort. This idea of paving, paying for the road in front of you is absolutely ridiculous.
And even more so, it's important in a community such as the city of Grant, again, because there are large parcels with very long, large roadway front footages that if you were doing your special assessments based on what that front footage is, or trying to figure out what the increase in market value is for that parcel as a result of that road project, it's all very impractical and it's not workable. And so it is a better idea to say that we need to build a road fund that everybody's paying into, that is part of the base property taxes that everyone pays in the community, so that you can have good roads in a rural community. There's no really other way to do it, especially since you don't qualify for any of the state aid money for roads because of the size of your community.
That's right. And take a parcel like mine. I have road on three sides of me. I have 3,800 lineal feet of frontage.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it would be just absolutely ridiculous. But we're going to go to the next clip now, and we're going to see the perspective on the roads from this.
One way or the other, this is bottom-up leadership. You are telling us what you want to get done. We do not send out postcards, as some cities do, and say, you are getting your road done. That's not how it works here. You tell us when your road gets done. And that's the way we like it. You should be telling us what to do as much as possible, I think.
But isn't it just contrary to the policy that they changed from listening to 75% of the people who live on the road versus now the city council just makes the decision no matter what the people on the road say? Yes.
Well, you were the mayor of Maplewood. How do they do the road policy there? Don't they have a road fund and then there is a certain percentage that is assessed to each house?
No, they do not. No, in Maplewood, the way that it generally is that they have, first of all, they have a schedule of various streets that are in different states of repair or disrepair, depending upon, the state of their surface condition. And then from there, then they plan out which streets they want to do. They figure out how much it's going to cost based on a feasibility study. Then they look at the funding sources. And so generally those funding sources can be anything from the sanitary sewer fund is part of it, the environmental assessment fund is part of it, bonding is a large part of it, and then the residents who live along that street then also are given special assessments where they have to pay a portion of that. And under state law and under the state constitution, whatever that special assessment is, it's not supposed to be more than the increase in your market value of your property as a result of that road project. And so that's really the challenge that oftentimes municipalities like Maplewood have, is because the road is already established. It's been paved in the past. They've got sanitary sewer pipes in the past. They've got water pipes in the past. There's gas pipes in the past. So there's nothing really new being added when a road reconstruction project comes through. So how can you claim that that road reconstruction project is improving the market value of anybody's property on that block when you're giving them just not a new and improved road, you're just basically giving them a repaired road because you let the one that was there go to pot. Okay? So that's the question. And so they are always teetering on how much can they charge for a special assessment that people won't go to court to challenge on. And I think on one of your previous programs that we talked about the road policy and grant, we talked about the squeal factor, in that if your special assessment is $10,000, people might start squealing, and then they'll say, well, there must be a way to object to this, and they'll go to court and they'll fight it. On the other hand, if the special assessment is only $4,000, they may not squeal too much because they do that cost-benefit analysis. They think if I hire an attorney, I go to court, I have to get an appraiser, I need to fight this to show it didn't improve my market value of my property. They're actually not going to go to court. They're just going to pay the $4,000 because it's cheaper to pay the $4,000 to the city than it is to go to court to oppose the special assessment, which they were charged. So you see, that's the balance that's always in the municipalities such as Maplewood, North St. Paul, Oakdale, where they've got a lot of housing and a lot of people per street. And that's why it's different than it is in your community in the city of Grant, because those people who are on a dirt road, are they getting a total reconstruction where they're going to get this total brand new paved road? It potentially could improve the market value of their property to go from a gravel road to a totally paved road. But that's really not the kind of work that's being done in the roads in the city of Grant, where they're really upgrading and improving them from gravel roads to a total reconstructed road with city water and sewer.
They actually have taken one small short road and turned it from asphalt black into gravel, and it cost 80% of what it'll cost to redo it.
Right.
But now the next clip we're going to talk about, this is Tom Carr, another voice we're hearing from. He was the mayor for 8 or 10 years. And we're going to hear what he has to say about roads. It's kind of a long clip, but we'll talk on the other side.
Highways, that's how we get out of here. We like to come home and we like to be not bothered and just leave me alone. But on the way in, we all take major county roads, we take state highways, we take state roads, 96, Jamica. We've done some horse trading with the county on which roads we would take, which road they would take to try to limit our exposure on what kind of maintenance we're going to have on those roads. They've taken over some of the heavier feeders. That's really helped. The people that live on the state and county highways, they pay tax dollars to Grant for maintenance on their roads. And just so we're all clear, if you pay $5,000 in real estate taxes, about 10% of that goes to Grant. Of that, that's $500. Half of that goes to the fine police and fire and everybody else that gets. So that's about $250 left over. So we're lucky if out of $5,000 you're getting $125 for road maintenance, grading, pothole patching, seal coating. That's what we pay. People on state and county highways, they don't get that because they're on a state or county highway. So that money then is given to other people on gravel roads and city streets. The reason I say this scenario is I've also heard people say, well, we're getting all this money. Well, we don't. And that's why your taxes are really cheap compared to a lot of other communities around. They are. So then we come off of those roads. Then we decide, and we have a choice per road policy, how you want your roads feeding your own house taken care of, okay? If I had my say, I would say the major arteries of the city that the city controls should be the first ones paved. I've heard some talk about not giving a little extra pavement to Joliet, but that's a major artery. And that's where everybody gets out. I can't say I'm happy about turning my front yard into the Audubon, and I'm getting somehow a deal on that. That doesn't make any sense to me, because I would just as soon, in the old school ways of Grant, when Mr. Wiehlander sat up here, keep it bumpy, it'll slow him down.
Well, no, that is certainly one road policy. Keep it bumpy to slow them down. But again, that can be dangerous, especially if you're driving those types of roads out in the country where there isn't any street lighting, and it could make for hazardous driving.
Oh, very much so. People will swerve to the other side of the road to avoid the big potholes, and they can't keep up with these. Like I said, they're spending $30,000 a year patching McCusick Road that's got a 5 or 6 inch base. They could have fixed it completely, and it would have lasted 10 years.
Certainly, he gave a historical perspective on, how the roads are maintained, if they are the county roads and all of that. But I'm not really quite sure what the context or the point was of why he went into all of this. Was there anybody in the audience there of the city council meeting that was questioning any of this policy history?
They don't allow many questions to begin with. He just has this Neanderthal approach that they want to be cheap about everything. Now, the interesting thing about living in Grant, 99% of the people that live in Grant can't qualify for food stamps. I mean, if you look at the income, I think the median income is like $120,000 or $150,000. So it's not a poor area. You have a $500,000 house, you think you would want a nice road to come to it. You see all the SUVs out there, you're seeing all these $50,000 and $80,000 vehicles. If you have that type of a vehicle, I mean, it's nice to have four-wheel drive, but do you need it to get to your driveway?
Well, and if you're investing that much money in a vehicle, you don't want to have it being damaged and requiring additional repairs as a result of the road conditions. Because, expensive cars are expensive to repair.
Absolutely.
And the tires are expensive as well. I mean, everything about an expensive car is expensive.
That's right. And so to me, I don't understand why they have this keep the cheap policy. It isn't, people would gladly pay $100 or $150 a year if the roads they traveled on were safe and secure and you could go at a normal speed and you didn't have problems. But they, for some reason, have this horse and buggy attitude where if you want your road fixed, you pay for it. Well, the people that are living on state and county roads are getting a free ride because they're very good out there. Well, let's go on. We're now going to talk a little bit about the whole road assessment issue, and we'll play the next clip and we'll talk on the other side.
I really don't, because I don't care what my road looks like. I have no invested interest in that. Can you assess, is it worth that much to your house? That's your opinion. Assessments are arbitrary and capricious when it comes to assessors trying to prove the value. It's really almost impossible to do. So I don't care. What I care about is what everybody in Grant wants to do with our road policy. I also care about getting that gas tax money a lot, because as soon as we get that, we are changing our road policy.
So what is it he's saying that he cares about?
Keeping the taxes low and letting the bottom up, and he wants to make sure when we get the gas tax, it's going to change. And it isn't going to happen. We have 4,100 people.
And I did hear him say that, it sounded like he was saying that, if that improved street is going to improve the value of your property, it's your opinion. Mm-hmm. And that's not really quite accurate. In court, if you do take one of these cases to court, if you have an opinion about the value of your home as a result of the road project in front of your house, that will be just your own personal opinion. That is not a professional opinion that the court will not give much context to, other than you as the property owner have your own opinion of the value. You do have to have a appraiser that you have hired who is going to testify at the hearing if you contest a special assessment. It isn't just based on whatever your own opinion is. You do have to have an appraiser who is able to testify in trial as to the value of that road and how it has improved the market value of your property as a result of the project.
Well, I want to focus in on a word that you had said earlier. You said slippery, and I have a different application. These are slippery characters with a slippery approach. They take, in my opinion, a shady approach to a lot of things. And you can see the double talk and just what's going on. But we'll go on. Let's see, go to the next clip. Keeping roads is the best they can.
7 years, you're on the list. And if you don't want to seal coat it, we'll give you some pothole patching, we'll give you some other stuffing. We'll let you pave your road, and we'll chip in that money from the city. And we do. This is your choice. Or you can wait another 7 years and wait around, and we'll do it for you then. We don't care. We're maintaining the roads as best we can with what we got. All the information I've ever seen, we don't want to raise our taxes to everybody, which I think is unfair, if you want to use the fair word. And I think Danny laid that out really well. There is no such thing as fair. So we can just kind of throw that one out the door. So, you know, right now, based on what I'm seeing, I'm not seeing enough support to even do this. So, you know, we don't have to. We'll just continue doing what we're doing. The roads are not going to crumble into dust. We can maintain them. Sometimes it's not as cost effective as we'd like, but that's our job. And we find clever ways. The Klein brothers were brought up. They do a great work. They've been a savings to us and a godsend in a lot of ways.
Now, we have just witnessed what's called a takeaway close. You have indicated previously that Mr. Carr is a salesman. He's a realtor. And what he has just given us is what is called a takeaway close. Now, before I was an attorney, I was a regional field training sales manager for a national company, and I taught people how to close deals. And that's why I know that's a takeaway close. What you do in a takeaway close is exactly what you heard. Well, this is what you've got, and if it's what you like, that's fine. We could do this other thing, but since it sounds like you don't want this other thing, that's okay. You can just stay with what you got. That's fine. I'm just going to pick up and I'm going to leave now. And of course, you get that feeling, no, don't sit down. Don't walk away. Please sit back down. I do want to get what you're trying to sell me here. Please come back to the table. Yes, Mr. Salesman, I do want it. So you see, that's a takeaway close, is that you make that person on the other side feel like, no, you're wrong. I don't want it to stay as it is. I do want to purchase what you're trying to sell me. And we witnessed it here.
I said they were slippery, and that's exactly what they're doing there. And there's more slippery stuff. You're going to see this as we go.
And this idea that, well, if you want to go out there and fix your own road, we'll give you the can of paint so you can do so. What is that all about? I grew up in the country. 20 miles from town, on country roads. Some of them had oil put on them to keep the dust down. They never once ever said, here, if there's a big pothole there, and you need to do some repairs, we're just going to give you the material and pay for the material, and you can go out and do it yourself. They sent out the grader, and they corrected the crown on the road, or they did whatever they had to do, because that's part of road maintenance. This idea that we're not, just wait again for another 7 years for it to roll around. No, you need to do something now. They should have had it in their budget, and they should have something more thought out for the long term.
Yeah, that isn't the way they do things. Like I said, they have a horse and buggy road policy that's absolutely ridiculous. And we're going to hear a little bit more from Tom in this next clip. So play the next clip and we'll talk on the other side.
We talked about, Tom does not agree with that. That's fine. We are not up here to agree with one another. That 51%, and the reason that I voted for that, is a very specific tool. It's a very specific tool. If we have small cul-de-sacs like we do have, the two we just talked about on Justin, those small cul-de-sacs, you get, perhaps that road is just coming apart, and the residents do a petition. There's only 6 residents on that particular cul-de-sac, and 2 of them are retiring or have other life changes where they're like, forget it, I don't want to put a dime into this road. I don't care how bad it is. I'm not putting a dime into this road for whatever reason. There's only 6 of them, okay? At that point, the council retains the power to go ahead and order a project like that. In fact, that 51%, it's nice to have it there, but if you actually read our road policy, the very last line in our road policy, like most of the policies we have in this city, says right at the end, the council may decide to implement any project that we think is in the interest of the citizens of Grant. 1%, 50%, 80%, we can order the project. That's within our purview. That's why we're up here to make these types of hard decisions.
Well, I bet you that lady in the audience who was bringing up the old policy was happy to hear that clarification.
Yes. Well, the problem is, though, they never want to do anything, as from what you've seen. There has never been a mention in this meeting of Joliet Avenue, which was the main feeder for 2 different communities, 70 people in Woodland Acres and 30 in Victoria Station.
And did they give any explanation as to why it was removed from the project?
No, they didn't. There was some comment that there were how many people were for and against it, and they only got 44% of the responses back, and so they're not doing anything. And part of the reason I would surmise is because both Huber and Carr live on this road, and they don't want to pay the assessment. Initially, they said it was going to be $12,000. The next time Brad Restock came in, it was going to be $18,000. And they have a couple more things in here too that I didn't take clips of. Oh yeah, it'll absolutely only be $12,000, and which he's always comes in, you know. And but at one of the meetings, it was going to rise to $18,000 per every person, and that is just ridiculous. You know, and you pay that over. Over 10 years, and you charge interest. What's really interesting too,
But yet
they charge 5% interest to the residents. You have money in the bank and you're getting 0.5%. So they're making money on this darn thing, on the road projects with interest they charge the residents.
Right, because that's over and above what the money costs them.
That's right.
In order to, even if they had to take out a loan and bond for it. And it's interesting that if indeed the reason that this main feeder road was taken out of the project is because council members live on that road and didn't want to pay that big assessment, that they can't just say, well, we're going to recuse ourselves so the rest of the council can make that decision whether or not, as Mayor Huber said, that it's in the best interests of the community to go ahead and do the road improvements of the main feeder road that serves over 100 households. And you see, now that would be what perhaps Mayor Huber and Councilmember Carr should do, is recuse themselves and put it to the vote of the council to vote on what is in the best interest of the community to improve that street that serves over 100 residents.
Well, that's the interesting thing. That discussion was never brought up. It was just all of a sudden, Joliet is no longer on the table. There was no discussion about that to speak of, and it's a done deal. And so now they're coming up with that. But
so it makes you think that they were talking about it in the back room or through a daisy chain, and that the decision was made outside of the public eye, a violation of the open meeting law.
which have been sued over multiple times. The other interesting thing is if we get a chance to see the full board again, you will notice that John Raj, who was one of the new elected member, has missed more meetings this year than he's been present.
Okay, and have they been excused absences?
We don't know. We have no idea. He just doesn't show up. There's also, we're going to have a resignation in this meeting too, and that's going to be interesting too. So what we're going to go to next is Snyder is the attorney, and I've had a few go-rounds with him, as you're well aware. He's kind of another slippery guy. But listen to his comment that he has on the road situation. So if we play the next clip, we'll talk on the other side.
Those assembled, I just want to revisit what a sort of garden variety assessment project looks like. Typically, it's either triggered by a petition or on council's own initiative. Council, when presented with the need or the interest in an assessment or road improvement project, then orders a feasibility study, and then issues a notice to all the folks that are affected and has a public hearing on it. Much of the things that, or many of the steps that have been taken here in terms of mailings to property owners, additional public hearings, all these other things are not necessarily typical. You might say that they're an exercise in, I don't know, raw democracy that doesn't normally happen in this type of process. And so when the engineer indicates that there could be additional inquiries to the public or requests for additional public hearings and so forth, that's obviously council's choice. It's not one that most councils generally make. Of course, a lot of councils don't go as far as has been gone here with the per to address mailings and all the rest of it. It is simply an initial public hearing on the matter, a review of the feasibility report. And so there's been sort of a belt and suspenders approach to testing public interest and desire on this front. Whether or not you choose to continue down that path will be a decision for the council to make, but this has been sort of a customized process. I just make that note, and it doesn't resemble what occurs in most cities. That's not a criticism, it's just an observation of the fact that
Well, my assessment of this belt and suspenders approach, Mr. Cedarstrom, is that they know that the types of road reconstruction and repairs that they are doing does not improve and increase the market value of the properties that abut the project. And that if somebody were to bring that special assessment to court and contest it, and spend the money on the appraiser and on the attorney and go through the steps of contesting it, that the city would not prevail. Because that is, in the end, what it boils down to, is whether or not it meets what is required under state law and the state constitution, and that all these other things that they're doing is just a way to try to see if they can sell it to the public so nobody will object. That's the belt and suspender approach they're taking.
Yep. It's really interesting, too. Now, I've lived in Grant for 26 years, and rarely do you see properties come up for sale. This last year, on Joliet alone, there have been 5 or 6 properties for sale. The original farm that I bought my land from has come up for sale. There's been a lot of real estate going on the market. And I think some of it may have to do with the roads and the conditions. They had a problem. They used to have independent contractors. Now they hire one contractor to take care of everything. And again, they violated the law on that, because the law says you have to have bids if you have a contract over $100,000. And this was $109,000, and they never sent out bids. So they're doing a lot of things that are, and now that the contractor that does the snow plowing and is responsible for the brushing and cutting and everything else, he gets $9,000 a month, whether he does something or not. So he had subcontracted some of that. We had a subcontractor mowing the roadsides. Well, that person no longer had his contract renewed, so the guy went out and bought an old tractor and threw some old guy on it running up and down the road. And so what we're seeing is because it's a flat rate, the less he does, the more he gets to keep. And it isn't a very effective way to do things. and he does plow a lot of snow, but the rest of the stuff goes on. I usually cut the ditches, the roadsides by my house, because I just take my bush hog out because it gets ridiculous when it's 2 or 3 feet high on the side of the road. But I, do a little public service there. But this is the type of stuff that happens all the time. It's like they don't want to do anything, they don't want to think, they just want to pontificate. Hell, I don't think they read the agendas before they get to the meeting. I mean, it's absolutely crazy.
Yeah. Now, how did this all conclude? This part of this meeting.
Well, that's what we're going to see, because the next clip is about the project vote. So let's see what they vote on.
I would still move forward with just Gennaro, Justin, and Grenilev, just on the next step.
How about 96th? Would you include 96 on the Justin Trail?
I would.
Okay, so your motion is Gennaro Court, Justin Trail includes 96, and Grenilev Greenleaf.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Do I have a second on that?
I'll second that.
You'll second that? Okay, very good then. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Jeff? Are you aye?
Aye.
Okay, and those against?
No.
If you notice in that picture, there was no one to the right of Jeff Kiefer. That's where John Raj sits, and he wasn't there again. I think he's missed 5 out of the 11 meetings.
Wow. I think there's a state statute about that.
Well, they don't follow any other state laws, so why should they follow that one, is all I'm saying. I mean,
And I find it interesting that, again, now you've got the council that is making this vote for the road project, to have the engineering done for it. But is it in the city's best interest to be doing road projects that are focusing on cul-de-sacs? Is that in the city's best interest? That's the ultimate question here. Has this council taken a vote with that as the yardstick by which they should measure?
no, they haven't. They're just going willy-nilly. It's the path of least resistance. Whoever else, like you say, will squeal the least.
And
by the way, that Justin Trail, there more people did not want Justin Trail than did want Justin Trail. So if you have to understand, Justin Trail comes in off 96, and it ends with a stop sign at Joliet. So if they pave Justin Trail, then the people will have one decent road to get in to and go down Joliet just a short way to get into the other Woodland Acres 70. And so not only that, those people primarily did not want Justin Trail done because they found out the kind of money they were talking about. But they're going to do that one anyway. But they very nicely are avoiding Joliet. And you can see the logic of that. Well, if we jam it down Justin Trail's throat, then we don't have to do our road that's all just terrible. There's more patches on Joliet, the main feeder, than there is actual road that's there.
Now, and I know we're going to get to this, but I want to point out the irony of something I observed in that last clip, knowing what the next clips are going to show, is that we saw that the motion was made by Denny Kopp, correct? Mm-hmm. The motion to do all this is made by the guy who could care less about whether or not he's reelected or not. He knows he's never going to be reelected. And so why is it that he knows he's never going to be reelected and he's pushing this down the residents' throat?
Who don't want it.
Who don't want it, and he could give not a care in the world about what they think about him. There's something coming up, isn't there?
Oh yeah, his resignation. That's going to be the next clip.
So you see, I found that was so ironic, is that the guy who is resigning is the one who made the motion.
Yep, and he was just elected in 2018 to serve in 2019. So now, theoretically, because he served less than half his term, there should be an election. But they're already talking about appointing someone.
Go figure.
Well, like I said, there's state laws and there's city of Grant laws, and they don't have to follow the state laws. But we're going to go on. We'll play that clip and we'll talk on the other side.
This evening to consider a resolution 2019-21, which is accepting a resignation and declaring a vacancy at this table. That is a sad duty that I am not happy to report to the public and to the audience. Mr. Kopp has notified us that he will be having a life change and he will not be with us any longer.
And he gives a little sad go-by spiel that, oh, you should be looking to the Planning Commission to replace my position. Well, excuse me, they should be holding a special election. Because, correct me if I'm wrong, if less than half the term is used up, you have to have an election. If it's over half,
and
it
he
could
was
be
he was elected for 4 years, correct?
4 years.
Right. So and the state law is, unless your city ordinance is different, state law is that if there is more than 2 years left, 2 years or more left of the term, then you have to have a special election.
And he resigned in November.
Right.
So the election was, when do we have our last election? 2018?
I think so.
So he took his seat again 2019.
Right.
So he has served 11 months of a 4-year term.
Right, and even if it had been, say, a year previous, because we've calculated incorrectly for some reason, it's still under 2 years that he has served because he resigned now. Mm-hmm. He didn't wait till January 1st or 5th or whenever would have been his anniversary year. Oh, but you know what? He sold his property in Grant, and he's probably got to be moved out of his house by then, and so you can hardly be on the city council if you've already moved out.
That's right. Okay, we're done with that, but we're going to bounce back to something else, something we've talked about before. There's a little lake south of County Road 12, and it's just the next parallel road that's east of Jamaica. It's called Jocelyn. And there's Sunnybrook Lake down there, and around the whole little lake is about 10 or 12 houses. And it is deadlocked. In other words, it doesn't drain anywhere, and it's silt loam over clay, so that's not draining soil. It isn't like sand. So they've had flooding. Matter of fact, the former council member Larry Lanou helped with another gentleman and put in a pump to lower help with the flooding. They Indian Hills Golf Club is on the other side of that road, and they allowed them to put a pipe through there and pump it to one of his lowland areas. It's got sand, so the water gets through. So they just took the pumps out here a couple weeks ago, and it's flooding again.
782 Jocelyn, and I am presently about 50% underwater for my property. Jocelyn Road is completely underwater. We have road closed. I don't,
Okay.
that didn't come to 68th and Jocelyn at all?
This is
Okay.
not your neighborhood.
Okay, gotcha, sorry.
Yeah, this is a completely
Okay.
different situation. We're actually talking about road improvement project, paving roads. Your situation
Oh.
is what I had talked about a little bit earlier when Danielle, I forget her last name, came up.
Okay.
You're the Sunnybrook area, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so that is what we're gonna be discussing a little bit later in our
sorry.
agenda. Oh, it's okay. Yeah, we're gonna discuss it a little bit later in our agenda. Mr. Berglund is here from the
Gotcha.
county. So he'll be talking to us about that as well. So, I appreciate that, but we're gonna get to that just a bit later.
Okay.
Ended up raising that road. Keats, it's called. If you ever go down Highway 36, Hool Feed Store is there, and you go straight up from that, goes by Indian Hills, and it goes a little swale around that turns to gravel and goes through a swampy area. And that's the area that's flooding. They have a little culvert there, but it's a kind of a drainage area from about a 1 or 2 mile area, and it's the low spot. So, and of course, we've had a lot of water. I do hay for my farming, and so I have a rain gauge, and I mark exactly how much rain comes down. And according to my rain gauge, we've had 6 inches of rain in June, July, August, September, and October. That's 2.5 feet of rain in 5 months. And some soils cannot handle that well, especially if you have a clay base. As some people may know, they will use clay to line a dump site because it's not quite impervious, but it's very, very close. It's hard to get, because the particles are so small, it's hard to get anything through the clay. And so, like this last year again, they put the electric pumps in, they pumped the water down, got it so they weren't flooding. Well, and they even raised this road, and it's still flooding. Now, the city has not taken the lead on this. Valley Branch Watershed District is what it's in, and they haven't been doing much either. But what's really interesting, and there's a kind of behind the scenes action going on, because as I understand, the city, the watershed has bought 4 houses. Now, to me, it doesn't make sense when for $150,000 you could make a permanent pumping station, get an easement from Indian Hills, which they'd happily give you, because 3 of the greens will flood when this happens. And he has a lot of tournaments there, and he doesn't want his golf course flooded. Mr. Reagan runs the golf course. I know him somewhat. Very nice man. He allows the pump to be put in, pays the electric, and it's been very modest. I mean, to get this done, and for $150,000, they could have a permanent solution, get an easement, get it done. But what are they doing? And what I've heard is they've already bought 4 homes, and they want to buy out all the areas and make it into a park. Well, you'd have got 12 homes at $400,000 or $500,000 a pop. That's kind of an expensive way to go. When $150,000, you could have a permanent pumping situation and have it taken care of.
Right, and I'm just thinking to myself, we're talking about the city of Grant, correct? Mm-hmm. The city of Grant is a rural community. Mm-hmm. The last time I was in the city of Grant, I think I saw that there's a lot of green space. Mm-hmm. Now, of course, it's all generally privately owned green space, fields, woods, other kinds of green space. What would the city of Grant be doing with a huge public park?
Well, the city isn't going to do it. This would be the watershed district.
But it would be in the city of Grant, correct?
Yes, it would. Well,
and so what would be the purpose of a large public park in the city of Grant?
Not a lot of sense. But I want to get to this next clip because you're going to see how they're coming up with a solution. You're going to find it very fascinating.
The approach is, if residents can get out, we're going to assume that law enforcement and squad vehicles can get in. Now, that can be circumvented by residents, of course. If a resident were to, for example, park their car at a neighbor's house and walk around or bike around or whatever means they may take to get to their car and then leave, access to their houses is not obtainable. We wouldn't know that unless that resident tells us that, right? So then, in a case of an emergency call, we would only find out then that, we don't have access to that. So I believe the lines of communication are open right now, and I'm not too concerned about that. We have made tentative plans, began discussions. If that situation happens where residents are going to stay, but access to that neighborhood is not obtainable by vehicle, we can entertain thoughts of responding to those areas by boat. And of course, we'd have to stage a boat somewhere, and we want to stage it.
What do you think of that solution? We'll just give them boats if the road floods.
Well, and I couldn't help but watch the expression of the lady who is greatly affected by this in the back. When she's hearing all of this plan, and then the idea about being told they're going to help her with a boat.
I mean, this is just hilarious. Short-sighted, they could have fixed it and had a permanent fix, but they're choosing not to do that. I've been down to the Valley Branch Watershed District a number of times. I've been with Larry Lanou, who's taking care of the pumping. They are going to put the pump in for next year. We've had a lot of rain this year, so the soil is very wet. If we have a very heavy winter, next spring is going to be a nightmare. But I see we're kind of getting to the end of our time. Thank you very much. You're a great help. And we'll keep you up to date next month to see what kind of fiasco goes on, but I would bet you there's not going to be a special election.
Thank you, Mr. Cedarstrom.
Thank you.